So officially welcome everybody to EDU 643 for Tuesday, July 14th. Tonight we are, nearing the home stretch of our time together. We're getting close. Week one, we worked on social presence. We actually probably knew what it was, but maybe didn't know the fancy name for it and how it got implemented in a face-to-face and then blended in an online learning environment. Last week, we did some incredible work around LMSs, and that work was to help kind of seed your thinking to not only picking an LMS, but the process going from, 20,000 feet to 10,000 feet and then getting down to that one choice. Well, this week we're working on best practices in online and blended learning. And, you have three big jobs this week. You have to construct your own online teaching philosophy. You have to create a checklist that you're going to use as a guiding document as you start creating those online lessons. And then you have to start getting into your LMS and making a course skeleton. I think this is a really fun transitional week, and it's a big week that prepares you as you transition to your next course shortly. So let me grab these couple of people that are waiting patiently. So as we venture into tonight, I do have some slides. I did link them to the course. So you can go ahead on that Tuesday night. If you weren't there, if you go on that the Monday, Tuesday, they are listed and I can put them in the chat. So let me grab the share link real quick for that. And then I will throw them in the chat. So that is to the slide presentation if you're interested in pulling that one up. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if it's okay with you, I think I'm just going to leave this in the non-presentation mode. It always seems to be a problem when you're trying to present with it. Notice the picture for today, puzzle pieces. That's what we're working on. A lot of puzzle pieces and kind of putting them all together. So we took a quick taking stock poll in Zoom. I could have done it another way. I could have had you do your reactions. So I could have had you do a thumbs up and a few other emojis or reactions way. But it's always nice as you get to this third week, just to kind of feel where you are. I know people looked at all the assignments going, oh my gosh, how do we put this all together? And so to help us, we had some readings that we did. So we're going to do a quick little group share or maybe do a little breakout. I might have changed that. We're going to look at some research that we talked about. We're going to look at that online teaching philosophy, which is where technically you're supposed to be, but I know we have a lot of overachievers in this group and many have already started it. Don't worry if you haven't, but it's something that takes a few swipes, a few attempts. So if you haven't started it, they should be saying everybody else should be doing multiple attempts to it. So it's no big deal. It's like starting over and over again. And then Thursday brings us into a guiding document, kind of a checklist. And Friday has you building your course skeleton. So before we do any work, I want to go I'm going to go out of order for a minute down to this one slide. This is a Stanford D school. And remember, I talked about it last week quickly as a way to do design thinking. I've used it for years. I really enjoy it. It helps me always frame some of my activities. And it sometimes, instead of pigeonholing myself, it makes me pull back and ask myself some questions or reach out to others that could do it. So the work you're doing this week is primarily in that. I put it in nice hot pink tonight to match one of our participants, I see. The work we're doing is in prototyping and testing. And so in prototyping, you're doing a lot of creation. So you're creating an online teaching philosophy, you're creating a checklist, you're creating a course shell. And when you do that kind of work, you're creating and you're testing, you're creating and you're testing, and you're kind of going back and forth. And so I call this phase the wash, rinse, and repeat. So as you work through your work the rest of the week, when you get your first attempt done, don't call it your final attempt. Walk away, come back the next day, or reach out to a peer, and they can be either in the program or outside of the program, and come back. This is hard work that you're getting into, and that perfection, which we all adore and love, or task, these aren't tasks. These are like lifestyle choices. And so you really need to think of them just a little bit bigger that way. So I just want to throw that out there so you can kind of see framing wise where we're headed tonight. So Monday had some readings to do. And in those readings, you had some that you could pick from, and then you had some that you could add on to. And we used this protocol called the 4A's. Has anybody ever used that 4A's protocol before? It's kind of interesting, probably a little hard to do at the lower elementary level, but you could do argue and agree. You could call it the 2A's or something. But these four A's are really helpful to pop into the documents, think deeply about them, and question. What do we talk to our kids about all the time? That not everything you read is true, right? Or you might not agree with, or you might think, boy, that author really built in a lot of assumptions. And I noticed this summer from running summer school, that assumptions could kill you, in the end. Like I look at this call volume to the help desk, when 897 calls came in about how to access something, that was a lot of assumption that our parents could do X, Y, and Z. And so that's why doing this 4A's protocol is really a nice feature to do. Reading article wise, is there anybody that saw some unusual assumptions in those articles that you noticed some of the authors were making?
I read an article. Oops.
Go ahead.
I read an article. It was about homeschooling and PE, and I almost didn't complete reading it because one of the assumptions was made that it was much easier to have your child participate in elementary PE than middle school and high school. And so I almost stopped reading because I was like, okay, we haven't talked about any of the fine motor skills, gross motor skills, locomotor skills, and teaching all of that properly. Maybe, to get them to play is easier, but to complete physical education is another aspect that they just made an assumption about.
That's a good point to make. You look at your articles and the titles always drive you, right? You get this great title that just is a perfect fit. And all of a sudden you get in there and it's like, what are they saying? How did they get to this point? And you have to decide. Sometimes you just stop and walk away from them, but also sometimes there's really great nuggets in them. Were there any arguable points in some of the articles that you read?
Yeah, so I have one. I watched the video of the lady who did the teaching, and I think because I don't know her, I was a little harsh, but her math lesson was terrible. Like if she was modeling how to do a math lesson, I about died. Just get problems and move on. There was no critical thinking. And she mentioned that she was doing best practices, and I really have no idea where the best practices were. That's my takeaway.
I saw some other heads nod. Did other people watch that?
I watched it too, Jamie. And what I was thinking was she's like, okay, run and get paper and pencil. what do you think, Nicole? Like half my kids come to school every year, they don't have anything. Like I'm providing all materials. So I'm thinking, okay, so am I supposed to mail packets of materials home? How do I know what they're going to need between mailings? Like the sheer amount, I was just like, where are you teaching that your kids are all supplied fully and ready to go and get crayons? I just, because my kids sure don't have them.
Well,
Mhm.
I would like to believe that this is kind of foreshadowing if we have to go to the digital version of school. But with summer school, we did make packets for every kid. And they had like a bin or a bag that they had with them at every lesson so that they had everything right there. And it was teacher driven and school driven. So like Culp would make decisions on what they wanted every kid to have. And then each teacher could say, I also need them to have a dice or this to participate with. And every kid was given a whiteboard. Every kid was given several pencils, though I was the only one that thought to give them a pencil sharpener. I thought that was a feather in my cap. But yeah, with one of the articles I read, the assumption I had heard, not the thing I wanted to argue is, yes, you're 100% right. We do need to be there for our students and we need to be present and all those things. But I teach 540 kids a week and I don't know how it's possible to be that present for all of them. I mean, I love them and I want to, but I don't know how it's possible. Like, I just don't think I can reach them at that level.
Anybody else want to add on to that statement? Does anybody else teach that many kids? So I used to. It's hard, isn't it? Um, I was a media specialist for some years, and I used a lot of technology before its time and did a lot of like centers and other authentic pieces. I tied a lot to the classroom teacher, and I thought about it the other night. How would I develop this close, tight-knit community that, I saw them for 72 minutes a week? And I don't know, that's a hard ask, isn't it? Do you consider, in this instance, would you consider, what LMS did you go with in the end?
Mine is kind of directed from my district. I have to use Google Classroom, no matter which one I like. Well, actually, we use Google Classroom and Seesaw.
Okay.
We have to use one for the upper grades and one for the lower grades. I prefer Google Classroom. I like it for linking things. I like it for making it purposeful. And I do kind of have a plan of how I want to lay out my instruction to be personable.
Good.
Actually, from that lesson that lady did, that her lessons weren't always great, but I do like that, like record yourself and pause and have them do an activity. So I want to do like instructional pieces that are like that ahead of time for the week or lesson or whatever. And then I want to offer meetings during the week. The hard thing is again, I have to have so many for so many kids. And if you have 30 littles staring at you, I think it works better in small groups.
Mm-hmm.
But when I have 540, that would be 100 small groups in a week.
It's good thinking. You're already starting to, plan ahead and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Any other ones that you argued with?
I had a question about, I read an article, I think it was like the 7 big ideas, and it had talked about like students like with the breakout rooms and stuff. And I used Zoom for the first half, and then we had to switch over to Google Meet. And it wasn't like kind of explicitly told by our district that we couldn't use breakout rooms with our students, but it was kind of like, maybe not so much, don't do that. So we didn't use breakout rooms. I didn't use breakout rooms with my students. And we just had kind of talked like with grade levels and like with that, just because I can't be there with all of them. So I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what they're saying. I don't know with all of that. So I don't know about that. I don't know how to make that better for them. I don't know if that's usable, because I like the idea. I think it's great. And I think like they would do that in the classroom, like pair up and group and talk and stuff. I don't know. I don't know if
It's so breakout rooms is great, but again, if it has to be district supported.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I noticed a few individuals that their district wouldn't let them unless there was an adult in every room.
Yeah.
And so what they did is they did staggered breakouts then. So they did group instruction for 15 or 20 minutes. And then they said, now we're all going to take a break, and you're 10:10, you're 10:20, you're 10:30, and then we'll come back together. And so they would usher them back in at 10-minute intervals to have that breakout experience, but while the other ones were doing something asynchronous. So that was a person's clever take on no breakouts unless there's an adult in each room.
Okay. Yeah. Because I like the idea, but I get the concern. And
yeah, it's hard. It's from that elementary perspective, everything sounds so easy and neat, and it really isn't. Your tools, they're under 13. You're an adult of up to 30 individuals or maybe more. And, the only other thing that another group did is they corralled all of their support people, their interventionists, and they checked them out. Like for checkout, I could check out my media center. I could check out my school librarian, I could even check out a speech person for like 10 minutes. And then you would invite them. That was the other way that people did multiple breakouts for younger kids at a time. So anybody else? Aspire. So we had that video of the gal that we just thought was horrible, but some inspiration in there. Anything that you aspire from what you read?
Well, I will go. Although I did quite agree with her video. Like as Jamie said before, I thought some of her things were a little unrealistic or not. She said that that you should be a guide. And I feel like younger kids need a lot of people. But with that being said, I did take some ideas like how she had her the background set up. It was very engaging and inviting for students. During remote teaching, I just had my plain wall background, but something to keep them engaged, something to set up like an actual virtual classroom.
Okay, so we couldn't quite hear all of it, Jo Marie. I don't know about the connection, but what I did hear was this virtual classroom setup, and this was a big topic in our district today. So, in the spring when we did remote teaching and learning, we did it from our homes, and our rooms were our rooms, but they really weren't very kid friendly, and elementary kids really enjoy the variety and the colors and everything that goes on. So what happens in the fall when we start in our houses? Do we make some better choices? And like I'm looking at everybody's screen. Do we keep our rooms white and stark for the fall? Do we start bringing some of the things from our classrooms to our house to give it that really kid-friendly look or feel?
Bitmojis.
Yeah.
I don't really have, you can see where I'm at. I'm in like a little cubby in my room, like in my house. I don't have a lot of space to bring a lot of stuff in. I guess I could put all my plants behind me and make it look like I was in a jungle.
or a green screen on the, or a fake screen on the back.
Yeah, I have a lot of plants, so.
Yeah.
Our district right now is in the middle of a huge bond renovation.
Mm-hmm.
So every single classroom is gutted and everything is in my gym right now on pallets. So we don't have access to any of our stuff. So that makes it a little bit more challenging too. We're hoping that our bond will be done by the time school also starts, and that things aren't delayed because of the workers not being able to work because of COVID. So we're in a predicament right now. Either if we start online, we don't have resources to bring home, or if school starts and we're not ready. So.
Okay. Any other learnings from those articles that you read or you brought to that table for other people to read?
I read 7 tips of the classroom. I'm looking back at it now, I'm trying to remember. And I liked, it talked about choice menus, but not so much a choice menu that you showed them, okay, here's the standard I want you to learn. I'm going to give you 4 ways that you can learn it, or 4 resources, and then you have to show me your mastery. So I kind of liked that way, and using that in my math course for next year. I think that'd be really cool to use.
Right. How many people tried choice boards out in the spring? You know, a real simple way to do them is in HyperDocs. So if you haven't done them in HyperDocs, that was one of the reasons that we just built the LMS last week also in a HyperDoc, just to show how simplistic and quick you could throw something up. And choice boards are a great way through HyperDocs. What was another article that you personally found that you enjoyed?
Yeah, I really loved the 7 big ideas as you shift toward online learning. I just felt like it was so engaging and all the video pieces. But more than that, I feel like, I mean, I guess it's another predicament about like what our district has us do. So we planned as a team, you know, as a 4th grade team, we planned our lessons, and it was like 3 reading lessons, 3 math lessons. And I'm very, you know, nervous that that's going to be what it is again. While it was great to collaborate, like I love the idea of doing the Wonder Days projects. I could just see so many students like really buying into that and like loving it, and having a mini lesson and then having a big project and having another mini lesson and a big you know, but I worry. So I guess it's sort of like I aspire towards that, but I worry because I feel like I'm not going to have that choice really, like potentially on the side, like I can do extensions. But our seat time for our kids, I feel like, was pretty low per day. And so I don't know if I could swing that. Maybe I could convince the whole 4th grade team, but so.
And that's interesting that you have aspire and worry together, right? Something that's so, you know, upper top shelf, and then the worries that go with it. Does rigor scare any of you? You know, the spring, it was kind of no grades, come as you please, you know, we're empathetic to your needs, your welfare. What happens when rigor gets put back into it for, you know, real reasons? How do we tackle that? Did anybody read anything that dealt with that rigor piece? Because elementary is probably the most rigorous place you have to work, because it seeds the foundational skills for everything coming forward.
I don't know if this, it can kind of go with it. I read something about like having like 5-minute conferences with students. And I think a big thing that I struggled with in the spring was connecting with students and allowing students, well, not allowing because I gave them the option, but students not asking the questions when they got stuck. And I think setting up the one-on-one meetings with students would allow them to feel more comfortable with asking me questions. And I don't know, I think that would just help making that connection and then being able to ask the questions and then help them right there. So
that's a good point to make.
I worry with the rigor piece by what we did in the spring. I worry that we kind of set ourselves up that they're not going to take it seriously in the fall. So because I'm just afraid, because I read one of the pieces said something about parents have to take a bigger role. I have parents that won't, they don't care. They're like, no, they're not doing that. I had one parent that told me with summer school that the little girl wouldn't get on because she didn't do her hair. Like they don't care, like they don't push them. They don't want them. They're not going to be that help. And I don't know how that's going to change in the fall. I had parents that asked like, is your stuff mandatory? Like they don't really do that, do they? And so I feel like I'm going to hit those same attitudes in the fall. Like that's not going to them, this didn't change like spring to fall. in our minds, it was always supposed to be different in the fall. The spring was just to get us by. But in their minds, I don't think it's going to seem the same way. And I worry that they're not going to care if we're more vigorous. They're just not going to do it.
I think like I had a number of parents that were already struggling with the hour and a half worth of work we had every day. Like parents were calling and saying, I do not have time to help them with it. And they shouldn't have needed help, but I hope those parents were noticing maybe the teachers aren't just, making noise. But they're having a really hard time. And I think if we go back in the fall, they're going to have a harder time because they're still working and their kids are all staying home. I don't know about your populations, but our kids are at home by themselves for the most part with younger siblings. There's no way they're going to be able to do more rigor. Like they couldn't even handle an hour and a half of non-rigorous work in the spring. So it's going to be a culture shock for a lot of people if we go to true virtual learning versus what we did in the spring. Because I don't know about your districts, ladies, but in our district, it was as pretty watered down as we could make it while still covering some content. But it was pretty watered down.
So what's interesting is now the conversation is shifting away from those articles, but it's the same topics when we're dealing with parents, the assumptions they're going to make, the arguing they may do with us, and they may agree with us. How do we get them to aspire, students and parents, to that higher level so that we can do our professional practice, which they're not used to seeing every day, right? School is rigorous for anybody when they come. We just make it look easy. And so how do you do that in an online environment? How do you onboard them to do better? Did anybody read any kind of onboarding families or students related to that higher level of the higher ask of true learning? Anybody have any ideas about it? It is a big one that is going to have to be tackled, right? And it's not something as a classroom teacher, I think that you can handle all of it. It becomes something as a school building, a culture. Will it happen the first week of school, do you think? So I don't know about you, but we have today in the town over an outbreak from a 4th of July party that is now, I think, taken like 75 people down. And it was kids. And it has really scared all the superintendents met in our area today. Like, okay, it was 3 hours on 4th of July. And within 5 days, 63 or whatever people had COVID because of it. So knowing that, it makes me think in our area that we probably will be online to start. We probably won't get the opportunity to be in person. I live in Ann Arbor. It's, we're kind of that metropolitan. We've always kind of been in the thick of it. So how do we start working on those assumptions that families may have or kids may have? Anybody have any good ideas or articles that they read related to that to get kids over the hump that this is just play school?
I feel like I'm talking too much.
Go ahead, sorry.
What I was gonna say is that article on the Ties Center it went through like every piece of it. It went through, but it was just so much information. It was hard to like dig into it deeply and come up with so much what you could pull from it. But there is so much about the parent piece, and I would get lost in an article. I'd find a piece. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm thinking. And then I'd go back to the beginning of it just to make sure I read what I read, and it would talk specifically about this is how the parents are feeling or something like that. And I'd get lost in the different, because it's going back and forth between what parents need to be doing and feeling and thinking to what teachers need to be spreading and stuff like that. Like that was a really, it's just so much because it's almost like a textbook. It's like reading an entire textbook instead of just one article. But it was definitely interesting and had a lot of those building points about like if we go back to school, different ideas and different things to work on those skills.
Helen, did you want to add something in?
Yeah, sure. So when I was doing some research for articles, I was thinking a lot about social and emotional learning and emphasizing that more than anything else in the first couple weeks of school. And Common Sense has a really good toolkit. I was trying to kind of pull it up. That was one of the resources that I posted. It's called Resources for Social and Emotional Learning. And it emphasizes different character strengths. And within each one, there's a lot of information, but there are resources for connecting with parents as well. And that was something I thought was really cool. And that's something that I think we need to emphasize.
I agree. Any other reading pieces before we move on? We're going to start ripping apart those assignments so we can get a handle on what exactly they are and what we're looking for. Any other readings that you would really recommend any of us here? Because that list was pretty long. It's very exhaustive now, but it's always a go-to place that you can grab articles for.
Mine isn't about an article, but I went back before the Zoom meeting just to like have mine pulled up if I needed to reference it.
Mhm.
And mine, so just go back and look to make sure yours are there, because mine I put on this afternoon were gone. But if you look back in like the search history, mine was there from this afternoon, so I copy and pasted, so that's all fine. But just so you know, double check to make sure yours.
Oh, somebody wrote over yours.
I think so, on accident, which is totally fine. I copied and pasted it there. So just go back and make sure yours is still there.
That is the downfall when everybody's in at the same time, and we do copy and paste fast around. Teachers do copy and paste fast, that's for sure. Okay, well, let's take a look at Wednesday's assignment. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again so we can kind of really break this down. First, how many people have already done their first attempt at their philosophy? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6-ish or 7-ish. For those of you that made your first attempt, well, how was it? What did it feel like? What did you struggle with?
I always struggle with the word count.
With
I just want to keep going on and on and on. And I really struggle because I think there's so much more that I could say. So I really had to focus on like answering the questions and not getting too off topic.
Okay. Anybody else's first attempt at their online philosophy, teaching philosophy? Sure.
I started with my face-to-face philosophy that I've had, and sort of pulled out the meaningful words from that. And then I had a hard time meeting the 500 word. Because one of the articles I read talked about clarity and concise, word choice. And so I was very mindful of that as I wrote. And then when I thought I was done and I was below the 500 word limit, I looked at the ISTE standards and I had to text my learning partner because it was this big aha. It was like, oh my goodness, a lot of what I wrote in my philosophy were, educator standards from ISTE, and some were in the student list. And so for me, that was an interesting parallel, I guess, as I'm still not done supervising, but
that is an interesting parallel. That's a great aha, that you were already living ISTE before probably ISTE created it, right?
Well, I've been living it a long time. So.
Anybody else have some words to the wise when you go to take that first stab at doing this?
Yeah, I agree with, I don't know who just went, they didn't pop up on my screen.
Nancy.
Nancy, thank you. That it was like, for me, it was helpful to start with like my in-person philosophy. That was really helpful. And then think about how will this be a little bit different? Then I kind of quit 'cause I got frustrated, but I'll go back to it.
That happens. So when you work on this, can everybody see my screen? When you're working on this, it does word count matters. The length matters. So nobody wants to read, although you probably could all write a 20-page, paper about it. Really, nobody wants to read anything more than 1,000 words, and probably they really want to read right around 500 to 750 words. So it's important to be getting more concise in that, because you're going to be doing a lot of writing, not in this CMU program, but in your life all year. Online is all about writing. And that's the one thing that I found to be the death of everything that we do, is we write so big and large, and our end users, kids or families, they want it in these little teeny chunks. And so even as you look at your philosophy, you can chunk it. You can put headings in it and chunk it down so that it's much easier to get through and understand. Remember, it's your beliefs. So no two have to look anything alike. You are looking at those important considerations. So as you move from that face-to-face to online, I think it's wonderful for the people that took your true teaching and learning from that very traditional standpoint and make that crossover to the other side. And, the short, because you're only addressing broadly the topics of, assignments and assessments and methods and those areas. And, you're trying to describe what I would say is the look and feel. I always call it the mini manifesto. If you had a sub in, it's like what I always used to share was my philosophy. So I always had my philosophy sitting in my subfolder, because I wanted that sub to come in and say like, oh, this lady really rocks this thing, or never thought about that. But I wanted that person to know my culture, my approach, my beliefs. I didn't think they had to live by them, but I wanted them to know the expectations that I had my students under all the time. So this is your mini manifesto. If somebody, met you in the parking lot and said, why do you do what you do? You'd hand this one pager over and go, this is who I am, and this is what it's about. And the biggest piece about this, it's not a one and done. So this can't be a task that you do once and call it good. Morgan shared hers, and then I did, just some simple markups. I didn't go wild on it, but the way I sent it back was kind of like, did you want to say this? Because this is what I got out of it. And then it drove, a deeper document, a deeper thinking that came out of it. And I'd recommend all of you, even if it doesn't say connect with your partner, connect with your school partner, connect with people that aren't in this program, ask a few of your peers or colleagues that you really respect to take a look at what you're thinking about, because that's what makes it better. This is yours, and there's no grade that's gonna, if you get all of the points, it doesn't make it any better by getting 10 points, and you certainly aren't going to get that. But you do it for you. You're not doing it for anybody else. You're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for your program, for grades or any of that. This is who you are and what you believe. So you really need to take some time, and you need to rewrite it every single day. So if you wrote it on Tuesday, then set it aside. Sometime on Wednesday, spend 1 hour on it, then walk away. Thursday, the same thing. And then, and even though you submit it, you can just keep updating it. Just keep working on it. I'm not going to look at them till the weekend, but I'd like to know that you have, gone through it a good 2 or 3 times, and then you'll start to feel good that you can live that out. Because as we get down the road, people are going to start asking questions. The longer we're in online learning, the more we have to be able to say, this is why I do what I do, this is what I believe, and then this is my daily practice. And so this ending of our course this is going to segue really nice into how you can show the why behind and start working on those assumptions and arguments and things that go against the teaching and learning process as it's out of that traditional environment. Does anybody have any questions about that assignment? Because I want you to all feel really good about it.
I found after you gave me the feedback, and I kind of thought about what you said, and I moved on to the second part, the Thursday assignment, and I was able to see like, okay, this is what I want to do. This needs to tie back. So that like gave me a fresh perspective, walked away from it, and then was able to make some connections. And like, how can I take what I just did and tie it back to like your comments and what I had done the day before?
And that was really smart, Morgan. We call that's backward lesson designing, right? You go to the end result, which Thursday is a drill down from Wednesday. And so you just walk it back and you will be able to clean up and make it that more concise to go back on Wednesday. That's a really good point to share with everybody. That's a beneficial one. Use your Thursday document once you do it to drive it. And again, you know, it says your Thursday document is due on Thursday. I'm not looking at them till the weekend. So you can keep going back and forth between all of these documents and then keep tweaking them because they all go hand in hand. The reason we put them on each different day is because we wanted to make sure that you didn't wait till Friday and trying to do a whole week's worth of work, because this is a whole week's worth of work. So that's why we thought we'll give them a day, but it doesn't mean they're really that day. You've got a lot of wiggle room in, but you need to tackle each one each day and then start marrying them back together because the pieces fall out of them. That is a really great point to make. Anybody else have any questions about that philosophy piece?
I do.
You should share with your principal. And I mean, I'd even say put it in your personnel file. I think it's just a really winner piece to have.
I'm assuming that we'll need this for like our ISTE certification, and that we'll probably look at it throughout the course or the.
Yep. And I'd revisit it, you know, when school starts after 1 month. It's one of those weekend things you pull up after you've survived a month and you're having a cocktail and, you know, you're just sitting down on a Saturday afternoon because there will be no sports. There's no, you know, there's just different. And just sitting down and going, okay, I survived it. Now let me go back and see, did I hit my points? Is this who I am? Is this how it manifested in through the fall? Or and also, is this a good time for me to revisit what I did in the fall and start making some changes? Because, you know, the fall will be hard to kick off if it's virtual to start. And you'll be doing a lot of tweaks, and what we call it in technology is pivoting. My team, I send them all the time that Friends video where they've got the couch. Does anybody like Friends here? Or are you all too young for Friends? You know, in the video where they're going pivot, and they're taking a couch up the stairwell. And I always have to send that to a few team members every once in a while, remind them what our job is in the district. Because in technology, we're the pivoters on a moment's notice. So that's great. Okay, I feel like you guys have a great handle on the Wednesday document. Anybody tackle the Thursday work yet? Okay, tell us a little bit about what you've done so far with Thursday, because this is different too. Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna flip over to Thursday. So basically what I did was I made my chart, and I had the first, what was it, the first three that they gave us, no, the first two that you guys gave us, and then I found 4 others that I really liked, and I kind of just fell down the rabbit hole. So like I clicked on something, and then at the bottom it was like, you might be interested in this, and I clicked on that, and then I kept clicking through things, and I found bits and pieces of everything I liked. And then I seriously just opened all the tabs of all the stuff that I liked and like read through them, and if I found one that I was like, oh, I really agree with that, I copied it over. And then I just kind of kept doing that until I had 25 points. And then I just really thought about what did that mean to me and why I thought like why that resonated so much. And just kind of like kept on trucking. And really after I figured out which tabs that I wanted open, which ones I really liked and didn't like, the rest of it was really easy. But I definitely did fall down that rabbit hole of clicking for a while because I'd get started and I'd be like, I don't really like how that looks. Or a couple of them, I swear they just copied like each other's. Like I
Of
wonder
course.
who was the original creator of that document. Because they were very similar. But I ended up with six that I really liked. I think six that I really liked. And just it kind of built itself once you found those resources.
Elaine, can you share a couple of the elements that you chose?
Like I'm sure that anybody else who's already looked at like etiquette. So etiquette for online discussions and emails and other forms of communications. So I really liked that one because students need explicit training on how to do that. Like they need to know how to ask questions and respond to one another and direct that response. So like if somebody said, "Can you help me?" I would then tell my students, okay, say, "Elaine, this is how you do that." Or Elaine, have you tried doing this? And I liked that one a lot because I did that with my fourth graders this spring. You know, I taught them explicitly through a mini lesson and a mini project how to do that because I knew that some of my kids were doing all their work on weekends when they were at mom's house, and some kids were doing it week on, week off with the parent. And I'm not going to be on all the time. So
Yep.
I needed them to be able to reach out, and there's always somebody on, and look for each other and help each other and just interact. So that netiquette was really important to me. I'm trying to see if there's one that I really, another one. There's so many. That's the thing.
Anybody else, another element, anybody else that started to work on this, come up with an element they really liked? Sure, go ahead, Morgan.
I found shapes guidelines for K-12 online PE, and as much as some of the other ones spoke to really online learning, this was really specific for PE, and I really liked how it just was. It looked different, it sounds different, it is different from some of the other ones. There wasn't as many pieces, as many categories, but it gave me a good base of like what was swirling around in my head that I couldn't find in some of the other documents.
So Morgan makes a great point. Go to your discipline. Like if reading is your specialty, there likely is a checklist to go with that and related kind of sort of to the online learning component. Math tends to have them. If you do a foreign language, there, you know, a world language, it probably has it. So go back to some of your associations that you belong to. You also likely will find those elements in their standards and elements too. Anybody else have any words to the wise about finding that Thursday project where you might find some of the resources? You know, what you're looking to do in the end is create your own checklist. This is what you're going to use to go against your lesson planning. And so first it has to be simple to use. If you've looked, I don't know if everybody's looked at that Quality Matters. It really is nice, but boy, is it really in depth. And so I wouldn't recommend that as your first attempt at building your guiding questions or documents. Perhaps as in 3 months from now or 4 months from now, we'll be at that point, but we aren't there yet. And so, you know, if you're going to do something similar to a Qualities Matters, you really need to step it down just a little bit because it has to be achievable for you. You're looking for at least 25 elements that will be a part of this checklist, and you want to make sure they're grouped. So remember back to the LMS assignment, that's one of the reasons that we did that way. You know, you had categories and then you had some subcomponents in there, and it's that same kind of thinking. You want to have some categories, some broader categories with subcomponents that you can go against and feel good about it. And then you always want to know, and you're going to see lots of overlap, because, you know, in education, there's only so many different checklist and guiding documents that can be created. So you will have to look a little bit to see who you're borrowing it from, because who you might think you're borrowing it from might not be the original owner of it. So you always want to make sure you're checking in the references, or looking around, or clicking on some of those links within, because sometimes they aren't the original owners of it. They've just begged, borrowed, and stolen just a little bit. And the last part of that assignment is equally as important. What 5 aren't going to make it on the list? There's just not enough space. There's just not enough, you know, whatever it is. But you really need to say, you know, if I had a second tier, I would add X, Y, and Z, or why I threw it off the list. So that thinking is critical, and you don't want to lose those 5 elements, because at some point they might make it on that list and you might throw some of the other ones off. So that's your backup hitter list. And again, that month from now, when you revisit it, you want to make sure you have those, because your checklist will change over time as we get more practiced in a true online learning environment sense. So
you asked for like a hint or a tip.
yes.
My biggest tip, like thinking about this assignment, is I did go on our COL for our district, and I thought a lot about what I do in the classroom and how that would translate into distance learning. So for example, our district expects you to make contact with parents or students weekly. And I do that in my face-to-face classroom. I call home every Friday or email home every Friday. And then I have a lot of contact with my parents. And the first couple of weeks of distance learning, I didn't really do that. I really focused on the kids that weren't connected. And so when I finally did start doing that, I had a lot of parents go, yeah, we missed hearing from you on Fridays. Like they had gotten used to it too. So be careful with what you put on that document and what you're committing to, because if you go from distance learning to face-to-face or back again, you know, you want to make sure that it's realistic.
Boy, is that a great point. Because when we look at, we had our meeting today about what school's going to look like. It's not unveiled yet, so I can't say. But as we transition from in-person to hybrid to fully online, that transition can happen in one day, right? So like, let's say it's a group's on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's virtual for everybody, and a group's on a Thursday, Friday. So you could have your Monday group in, and by the end of the day, something could happen just like it did last spring, and now you're closed down, or Thursday will be the next day maybe. So Elaine brings up a really, well, hi. Elaine brings up a really good point of make sure you're checking it against your traditional practices too, because you know they have to be flexible, and those routines have to feel normal. One thing we talked about in our district today is that very thing that Elaine said. We want our routines and our schedule to be the same, whether they're in person all the way through. So we really looked at a change in schedule so we could make sure the routine didn't matter. It was just the location where learning would take place. And that's a hard transition to do well. Great. Does anybody have any questions about that assignment that's due? Because I love the way that you described how you worked through it, Elaine. I think that'll help people that haven't started it. That is, you know, a big thinking one, and then you drill it down. And then just like Morgan said, you go back and compare it against your Wednesday, because then you're going to change things on your Wednesday philosophy based on that. Great. So we're doing good so far. Anybody have any questions about those 2 assignments? Great. And then the last one that we have is the Friday, the teaching shell. So this is where the fun really begins. You do the hard work middle of the week. Thursday, you're starting to rope in what your checklist. And Friday, you're getting, and really you can probably do them together on Thursday. As you start building it, you could get in and try it. And that's where that does stand for design thinking, prototype, test. And so if I was building my shell, I'd start probably doing it as I was creating that guiding document and work back and forth. For the shells, it's going to be interesting to see how you take that checklist and how you get that layout organized. Does anybody have any fears, concerns, worries about that, or more excited to get in there to play around?
I'm not really understanding what you're looking for. And we've been kind of talking about it on Facebook, and I don't understand what you want. So I built a Google Classroom. I have my topics outlined. I have my contact information, but a lot of my resources, I'm going to have to build. Like, I'm going to have to video myself. I'm going to have to make some like hyperdocs and things like that. Are you looking for that right now? Or are you just looking for like the basic shell? Because if you are looking for that, then I have a lot of work to do. If you're not looking for that, you're just looking for the shell and I can build up after this week, then I feel like I'm really good. I'm just kind of concerned. And a lot of people on Facebook are also confused about what exactly you want.
So I
I'm
think
sorry, I'm
for
talking
the
a lot.
shell, so depending on your LMS, it's either easy or hard to do. And so if you can't do any of the builds or layouts because you don't have activities done or you need some video pieces, I think probably the best way to tackle it would be to put it like in a one-pager. This is what I plan on building, so that we can understand how you're taking those guiding that checklist and say, I plan on using this routine. So like for an example, in Schoology, it'd be very, very easy to do because it's folder based. So I could do the folders and I could even put a little note in and describe it. We need to have some description or understanding of what it looks and feels like at the shell level to make sure that when you get to that next class, you're ready just to start popping stuff in and you've answered all those questions that questions or checklists that you've posted for yourself.
Okay, so for example, in Google Classroom, I built my classroom. I have my topics. I have like a frequently used link section and I've put some of those links in there. And so when you go in, like it's easy to see like, okay, I'm going to drop assignments in these different things. So you're saying go ahead and maybe on that document, that big course overview square, the table we're making, in addition to the column that we have to add the shell considerations, you want me to write like a short,
just a short
paragraph,
little,
like a paragraph
it.
saying what I'm going to do and how I'm going to drop. Okay. That makes me feel a lot better. Thank you.
Yeah, you're going to do all of the really heavy lifting build in your next class, but we want to make sure that you have a good plan in place so that you don't have to be recreating your shell before you start building, and building is the very first thing you're going to do. So like when I check across your artifacts, I'll start, the very first thing I'll do will either look at your shell or read what you're doing for your shell. Then I will compare it against your philosophy. So I'm going to do it out of order. So I'll go shell first, then I'll go to philosophy. Can I see the parallel to what they're going to do? And then I'll use the checklist. So I'll do it just a little bit backwards, but that's the best way to describe it. Does that make sense?
I have a quick question about.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. About the column, where the column on the indicating how you consider this your shell, where is that going?
So you have a document and you're just going to add one more column to it on the right hand side. And then you're just going to, pardon?
Which document?
It is, let me see.
It's your personal standards
It's your
document.
personal standards. It's your Thursday document.
So what I did was I just made a copy of that and then I pasted it and I added another column to the right and I labeled it standard, whatever it said to label it. and then I just shell considerations, and
Yes.
then you just kind of think about each of like where it would go on your shell considerations. That's what
Okay.
I did.
Yep. And when, for this assignment, when you sketch your course, you're answering those questions of communication. So when I look at it, I'm going to go, okay, Elaine, talk to me about your course shell. How do you plan on communicating? Where does it appear in there? Do parents have access to it? So if they don't, how are they getting connected either through your LMS or through another communication measure? What are the routines for the students you serve? So if Elaine said she was going to do one-on-one or one in small group, where am I going to see that in that LMS that's going to support that activity? For assignments, are they all graded, or are some for self-reflections, or are some for, whatever? Do you use a portfolio component? Feedback, pacing, those all become important pieces. They're your primary pieces that you're going to use. Remember, we read that article in the LMS where like 91 or 3% only used it as a repository. Well, if we're going to live ISTE and live good online teaching, then our LMSs better be more than just a repository place to do it. And so we know from all of our work from social presence and then all of that deep dive into LMS that we've either picked things or are going to layer in third-party tools that meet our district standards to go ahead and build our course that way.
I know I'm a bit of an odd duck because my situation is different than a lot of people's, but so essentially in the end, I have to create 22 different Google Classrooms, and I assume you only want to look at one of them.
Right, just one.
But another aspect I was looking at when I was looking at all the digital options, and I'm really stuck on this parent piece of it. I think that's going to be really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually thinking about making a Google Classroom for the parents, separate from the students. Because what my parents get into doing is they comment for their children. And then I've got adult comments mixed in with the kids' comments, even if they're in there different things. And then I just a mess. So I'm thinking about making a parent Google Classroom and then have the student one. But my parent one would, again, probably be grade specific. So I might have 50 of these Google Classrooms by the time I'm done with all this. But if I do decide to do that when I'm going through this, do you want access to my parent one and my student one?
Yeah, I would. If you do too, that would be really beneficial. Parents are a big piece, that we looked at last week in LMSs. One of the benefits is, having them in some portion of it to be an active participant, especially if they have to be our online, if they have to be our home assistant, if our students are working from home. Any other questions or suggestions or recommendations to your peers about how to get through this portion of the assignment?
I have a question.
Sure.
As an instructional coach who works with teachers, like, should I build this Friday online shell as like what I'm going to do to do like PLCs and conversations with teachers, or like make like an example for teachers?
It's your choice. Where do you, in your fall role, will you be more of, if you're more of implementing the PLCs, then hit from that approach. If you more are modeling what good online learning looks and feels like, then go from that approach. But do what you're primarily going to be doing in August and September, because that's going to look probably a lot different. Every 2 or 3 months, your job will be just like technology. You'll be pivoting. So you'll have a starting couple of months and then a next couple of months. And so do what you would do first for those first 2 months.
Okay.
Because then you're ready to go, which would be nice. Anybody else?
I have a question, and I haven't looked at this yet, but is it easy to send like access to courses through like a district? Like, I'm already set up through my district. I'm with Canvas. Is that easy to do? I don't know. I haven't looked up how to do that yet, but I don't know how to do that.
If you can't do access, the best thing you can do is screenshots. So
Okay.
I don't feel like I have to be in your system. I think it's just
Okay.
as easy to attach a couple screenshots and call it
Okay.
done.
Okay.
You know, some districts, like in my district, when I saw that, no, I didn't write that piece and give us access. That is a no-no. So,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
I'm really okay. Just a couple snapshots, and then, you know, if you can't build out your shell for how the limitations of your LMS or for whatever reason, a description about what you plan on tackling, so I can at least compare it back. So, and
Okay.
that's fine. Don't waste your
Okay.
time on trying to figure out how to get me in. Just snap something.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you. So we have Schoology, and I just finished my first year, so I believe they loaded it for me, and then I kind of created all my content, and I want to be able to use this. So do you know, am I able to create my own course, and then when they do assign me my real course, you know, come August, I can just copy everything?
Yeah,
like,
you can copy it over. Yep.
Okay, perfect.
they
So I was
call it-
nervous, like, yeah.
Yeah, they call it when you are creating your own course, it's like a sandbox. So it appears what you want to make sure before you create that sandbox is that they've rolled the new school year over, or know that you can put it somewhere, because it'll get archived the minute that you know, the Power School or whatever your SIS gets disconnected, you know, to do the cleanup. And so you just want to make sure it's in the right year or find it in archive. But yeah,
Right.
just copy it over.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to waste the time, you
That's
know.
$10 for a tech call.
Amber, I know
Yes.
that in my district, that ability for us to create a course is turned off by our tech director. So I had to contact her and ask her to give me.
Check in and then do it. We
Yeah.
leave
So
ours
that,
unchecked.
if you don't see create
Yeah.
a course, that's probably why, because I ran into that same exact thing with Schoology.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Michelle.
And so I see, like, I can't believe they would do that, because there's nothing wrong with creating a course. I think more privileges gets more people in doing the things you want them to do. But yeah, good point to make. Anybody else have any questions about that that last assignment?
I just have a question about how to give you the access to our shell. Can you touch on that again?
Yeah, I said just snap some pictures, screenshots. Just take some screenshots of it. I don't think the access. Huh?
And put it under our.
Yeah, just put it under your document.
Like in the process journal, or
or the
website.
Oh yeah, you choose. You just tell me where to find it. You know.
Okay.
And then it can be temporary. You can take that piece down after you move to 642, because obviously it's going to be a lot deeper. So however you want to put it into your documents, that's fine. Just let me know. But it'll all work out. You figure out how you want to do it, and then just tell me. I'm pretty flexible on that. Can you see the transition now? Sometimes this was a hard week to describe to everybody. Does it make sense now how we're getting from the beginning of the week to the end of the week? Okay, and we feel like we're all going to be successful? Okay, cool. So our group was so small, it was just as easy to have a conversation tonight. I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a minute.
I don't want to get too far ahead, but next week is that 4-0 week, right?
Yep, it's a transition week.
So are we going to meet our new instructors next week?
You are. So I don't know if we meet either at the end of the week or on the weekend, but we will do a transition. So we do a handoff. The last I had heard, the handoff was we were doing Monday and Tuesday of next week, and then Tuesday on or Wednesday on, they were taking over. So we're actually doing a crossover project next week. That was the last I heard, but I did miss a staff meeting, so I probably shouldn't overly commit. But yeah, next week's that transition week to get you to your next class.
So, I mean, I understand it's a transition week, but I think, are you all still grading that for 643?
We're grading, I know, through this weekend, and then we were up for discussion how we handle that next week. So we lost a week in 642 because we gave it back to 590. So we had talked about doing some type of shared. I think what we're probably going to do is break you in smaller teams for next week, so that, because there's like 8 or 9 of us, and then work with our smaller teams to get the work going for the week and then hand off. So we'll know. I'll make a mention to talk to the professors of this group and then see what day we were meeting, because we did need to do one follow. We met before, like 2 weeks before our class started, and kind of did our initial. We've got some really cool activities to do, and we just didn't have a meeting this week at all yet. You're all gonna miss us.
I have a question, like bigger picture.
Sure.
I know we're at an accelerated pace right now in the summertime, but how are things gonna look when we are going back to school and our classes are 8 weeks? I mean, is it gonna be as fast paced as we are right now?
It's gonna be normal. No, it should be. So I'm teaching this same class in the fall, but in 8 weeks. And so it'll be at a more normal pace. So, you know, this isn't truly an accelerated class. Anytime you take a class, it's between 12 and 15 hours of work that goes into it. That's why it's so intense in the summer, because we've got to meet the requirements that the accreditation board puts together. And so it'll be at a more normal pace. So we'll be taking this course that we did with you and spreading the same content out over an 8-week period, and doing probably, we'll get a chance to do more scaffolding over time instead of every day, here you go. It'll be something, think and work on it, something, think and work on it. So does it scare you to think how you'll do your job and do school?
Yeah, because and if we are home and then our kids are home and I'm teaching my students, I'm teaching my kids, and I'm teaching myself, I'm a little bit worried about the fall, a little overwhelmed with that.
I'll make a mention of it. I'll let them know that that sits out there. I thought you guys were all a little shell shocked when he came to 642. But we really got the hang of it quite quick, how to get, you know, that deeper thinking and really high quality work. And so I'll make a mention that sits out there, and maybe we can help frame what an 8-week course will look like versus an accelerated course for you guys. So I hear you on that.
Just because I think in May, I don't want to speak for everybody else, just feeling overwhelmed with not knowing what school is going to look like for me as a teacher and for me as a parent, and worried about my children. So there's just a lot of anxiety right now, and being able to clear one thing up would be great.
The good news is the coursework you're doing this summer should inform your whole first month of instruction.
Yes.
You know, and so that should help a little bit with alleviate. So that's why it's really important to get some big builds in that next course, and anything, you know, that you can start getting going on would be really great, so that you can start off a little bit, you know, start off maybe a little light and not have so much to worry about. And we did that for our teachers. We're getting ready. We're looking to build all of their first months of curriculum out for them, so that they can focus on the, you know, social presence and getting the handle of what potentially, you know, an incredible amount of online learning could look like, you know, given what we're seeing in the state right now. Any other questions or things that need to be addressed? Okay, if I ask you that same poll question, you're all awesome, right? Are we all awesome now? Do we all feel better? I like people feeling better in their day. Anything anybody wants to share, you know, anything you think somebody should read or think about, or things you're pondering? I still want you to ask me tomorrow. Oh, you're a hard sell, Nicole. Are we good to call it a night then? Okay, well, I'm going to turn off the